Well, good morning, everyone. Our hearts go out to those affected by Helene and soon to be Milton. We're living in a lot of troubled times right now, so we have to support each other. Please keep everyone in your prayers. My name is Betty Gardner, CEO of ProTrain. We want to sincerely welcome all in attendance today at this year's annual Continuing Education Training Institute, known as SETI. Each year, SETI welcomes continuing education professionals representing colleges, universities, adult education programs, and professional development organizations. Continuing educators are in a unique position with the rising cost of attending degree-based programs, as the certificate and certification programs that CE offers are cost-effective, less time-consuming, and often allow the student to enter the job market making more than their counterparts. SETI has been in person for several years, but this is the fourth annual virtual live conference at no charge to our attendees to allow all of you to continue your professional development. Since its inception, SETI has grown to meet the continuing education needs and cultivate an understanding of industry trends, credentials, and stackable skills. Because this is a Zoom event, you are automatically signed up for the entire conference. Keep your agenda handy and join any session you like. If for whatever reason you cannot attend a session that you wanted to due to work, rest assured that you will still have access to the session recordings and the PDFs of the presentations. This is truly a feature to everyone's benefit. Whereas if you missed an in-person session, you just missed it. We bring together national leaders in continuing education with industry experts to explore workforce trends. SETI is a high-powered conference where education and business meet, focuses on certifications and stackable skills that prepare students for real-world jobs in today's workforce. Participants learn real-time applications to improve profitability, best practices, and what's new and needed for high-demand careers from business and industry leaders. During SETI presentations, I want you to be prepared for a training experience, not just a lecture. SETI brings together national leaders in continuing ed with business experts to explore workforce trends that impact your students and your programs. This high-powered training conference offers specialized training to enhance educational needs. Sessions offer real-time applications from education business leaders representing leadership from our attendees. We hope this experience will spark new ideas for attendees to implement and serve students. So for each of you who took the time out of your schedules to attend this year's conference, we will do our very best to make sure that you enjoy, pick up on industry best practices to educate, engage with one another, and go back to your respective schools and enroll more students. That's what it's all about, the student. This year's SETI has registrations with professionals from across the United States who all are focused on helping their students find their career paths or perform better in their careers. I also want to take the time up front to thank our wonderful sponsors. Without their support, we would not be able to host SETI at a cost-free opportunity for you and continue the most cost-effective training institute designed to give each of you real-world practices so you can experience where and how business and education meet. This is an opportunity for us to learn what businesses need so you can provide the latest to your students. Our title and gold sponsors are genuinely involved in assisting you and your students succeed and have the best student experience possible. So let us recognize and give a big round of virtual applause to our sponsors, speakers, and panelists. We are very fortunate to have them, so thank you. Our focus this year was very strategic in selecting our speakers, panelists, and topics. Our SETI focus is on revenue streams in working within continuing education professional development communities in the continuing evolution of how important and key we are in meeting the educational needs of our country. Nobody has money anymore, so we have to be very strategic. This year, you will experience all new sessions and funding sources for your students. We will explore trends in AI, cutting-edge professions, workforce development, military scholarships, grant funding, and nonprofits. Next, we want to get your input. At the end of this event, we will ask for your candid feedback and suggestions through an online survey. So all I ask is please take 2 to 3 minutes to give us your valuable feedback. At ProTrain and SETI, we are all about education to employment. As we've said, where business and education meet. SETI will remain focused in this regard. We certainly look forward to the next 2 days worth of virtual sessions. So once again, thank you for your attendance to our generous sponsors, and let's get ready to enjoy, educate yourself about innovative educational trends, and engage virtually with one another. And go back to your respective school and service and enroll more students. With that, we are going to get ready for our first session, which is going to start a little early. So we will have Dr. Stank. There we go. Okay. So with that, I would like to get us started with the first session, which is entitled 100% Certified Organic Characteristics of the AI Augmented, Human.
Well, thank you very much, Betty. I sure appreciate it, man. I hope everything's going great for everybody. Welcome. Let's see, I can't seem to start my video. One of these days I'll learn how to do that.
Well, James, I want to introduce you first, so if you can go to the second slide, sir.
Okay, sounds like a plan. There you go.
Okay. I wanted to personally and professionally share all of our sponsors, and I want to give a big thank you to all of the SETI 2024 sponsors, especially CIW, our title sponsor, for their outstanding support, and also AMCA and ProTrain for their generous contributions. Your partnership will make this event a success. And it's very important to recognize sponsors because a lot of times we go to conferences and you set up a table or you do virtually, and we really feel like it's very important to recognize these individuals, these companies that care about education, and they care about you and sharing and learning best practices. Let's go to the next slide, please. A little bit of housekeeping, just like every webinar has. The session's being recorded. We've already told you you're going to get the recording and the PDFs. Attendees are automatically muted when joining. Please use the Q&A box located on the lower navigation to put all your questions, and we'll get to those at the end. And we really would appreciate it if you'd post to social media using our hashtag SETI 2024. That will help us get the word out. And especially also, we have on LinkedIn a SETI alumni group. What's the importance of that? That is for you, educators, professionals, to be able to communicate year-round with your colleagues, your counterparts all across the nation. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to introduce, we're very proud to have Dr. Stanger as our keynote speaker today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. So thank you for joining today's first session with CompTIA's Chief Technology Evangelist, Dr. James Stanger, for an enlightening keynote session on the transformative impact of the AI in the workforce. Dr. Stanger will delve into how organizations across the globe are unraveling the complexities of AI adoption and integrating AI into everyday practices. He will share insights on the unique technical and durable skills that professionals need to harness AI effectively, ensuring that we will remain not just tech savvy, but also more human in our approach to technology. Dr. Stanger today will enlighten you on identifying key AI layers, evaluating essential AI enhanced skills, indicators of success in AI-driven work, and practical AI adoption and upskilling. Dr. Stanger has consulted with corporations, governments, and academic institutions on cybersecurity and emerging technologies for over 25 years. Organizations include AWS, AstraZeneca, the University of Cambridge, Nissan, and the U.S. Department of Defense. James is a working IT professional and is an award-winning blogger and educator. He's a member of various advisory councils including the Forbes Technology Council, the AFCEA Cyber Committee, and the ATARC Future of Secure Work Committee. As president of the C3, James leads a consortium of leading global cybersecurity certification bodies, which include GIAC, ISC Square, CompTIA, ISACA, the IAPP, FITSI, and CERT Nexus. He is currently CompTIA's Chief Technology Evangelist and lives and plays in the Puget Sound area of the United States. So with that, I give you all Dr. Stanger.
Well, Betty, thank you so much, man. You make it sound like I'm almost official. I sure appreciate you give me that introduction. Thank you so much. Well, welcome everybody, and I can't wait to talk to you today about what it means to be 100% certified organic when it comes to using artificial intelligence. Again, my name is James Stanger, and I do a lot of work with leaders, IT workers around the world. And I represent today CompTIA. It's a leading organization with what, over 4.5 million, 5 million people certified. So it's fantastic to be here today. And I just got back from a tour of Eastern Europe for CompTIA. Before that, I was touring, trying to remember, I believe it was Australia. Before that, I was in doing some touring of the US for CompTIA, and before that, I was in Asia. So we're going to discuss a few things about what CompTIA research has to say, about some things that what makes us human, and believe it or not, it's technology that does, how AI can augment what it means to be human, the key AI layers that we need to understand to move forward to use AI productively. And we're going to talk about ways that humans and AI are going to interact, okay? Because that's the key area, the key area of key importance. And I'm just looking here to see where people are joining in from. So 19 states represented. That sounds fantastic. Betty, thank you. When it comes to getting past the AI hype, I think it's really important to do that, to get past what I call superficial intelligence, okay? It's all about getting real intelligence. And then critical skills that you need as a 100% certified organic individual as you work with AI. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, I want you to take a look at these pictures. Over the last little while, most of these pictures were taken in the Washington, D.C. area recently. I was at a conference called the Billington event. And you're looking at people from, let's see, Oracle, from Accenture, from the CERT, cert.org, and also people who, let's see, those two guys on the right help oversee the IT and operational technology for both the Dulles and the Reagan airports. So you're looking at pictures of people who actually use AI all the time. And some of the things that they're going to tell us, I'm going to share with you. I'm going to share with you also insights from other organizations and other places around the world. But one of the first things that I want to share is it's early days when it comes to AI. Okay, so when you hear things about how job roles are being eliminated or not eliminated or created, it's early days, folks. Okay, these changes are coming much faster, but I would use the analogy of the blacksmith turning into the mechanic, auto mechanic. That took what, a roughly 20, 30-year period, didn't it? Right? Automobiles were created, right? And then automobiles and blacksmiths and all that lived side by side. Blacksmiths, working on horses, as it were, shoeing horses and things like that. But then things kind of took over in the automobile over a period of 20, 30 years, right? Well, when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's happening much more quickly, but it's still early days. It's one of the first things. But what these folks talked to me about was what makes us human. And take a look at this picture. There's a picture of my a son, actually, walking on water. Okay, he's in the middle of the Puget Sound, literally completely surrounded by water. And yet, through his curiosity, he heard people's conversations, and they were mentioning how they call it a reef, bears up. It comes up because the water goes down in an extreme low tide. You're looking at that took place sometime in July timeframe, does every year. And you can actually go and walk in the middle of the Puget Sound. Now, he discovered that through his curiosity. He's a good listener, right? And so what does it mean to be organic, to be a human, right? Well, on the positive side, I think curiosity, empathy, and iteration. And the reason I list these three things is because I've asked the people in those pictures that you saw, people from Accenture, Oracle, other organizations, and they start with kind of these three things. And I know iteration seems like a strange one, but almost everybody starts with either curiosity or empathy as the most important kind of skill, right? Iteration comes from the word journey. Well, itinere, a Latin word. And the idea of iteration doesn't necessarily just mean you're on a journey. What it means is that you keep trying. You may not get there the first time, but you keep trying, so persistence. And if you want to unpack this even more when it comes to what makes us human, the ability to engage in a dialogue. And I think that's really important. If you don't remember anything else from the presentation positively, think about the idea that a dialogue with AI and how important that is. Okay, so dialogue, creativity, resilience, the ability to kind of get past setbacks and things. So those are the things that make us human, right? So the promise of AI, and this is just one person, his name is Kawasdis Brooks. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia. He is a security operations center manager for AT&T. And he's one of many people who've kind of chimed in and said, well, the promise of AI, of course, is to identify patterns, draw conclusions, make predictions, do these and create data models independently of human input, right? I mean, that's the promise of AI. And most people get really hung up on that independent of human input kind of thing. The idea is that AI can work without human help or even improve itself, or at least morph itself, if not improve itself. But the idea of assisted decision making and the idea that you can help human beings more creative. Now, is that fair enough, right? I mean, isn't that about right? Does that capture it? Because what we've done at CompTIA, we've done a lot of research about the current and potential uses of AI. And we're very cautious to talk about what's happening now, right? As opposed to what could be happening, right? And when it comes to what's happening now, these are the kind of top areas: automation, data analysis, things like that, that seem to be the areas of the most, where things are being used right now and of the most interest. So cybersecurity is listed in there, but notice data analytics, automation, and chatbots. And when it comes to chatbots, those have been used for years, long before we ever heard of the phrase ChatGPT or the word Bard or what have you, or Copilot. So it's used in many applications. And I want to say this, that one of the most productive uses right now of AI is in conjunction with another technology. And that's, I'm sure that's like, well, that sounds real interesting, James. But think of it this way. There's something called Ansible. You could Google it. It's a technology that with just a few lines, maybe on your screen of lines maybe this long, just maybe a dozen lines, maybe 20, 30 lines, you can launch 1,000 servers in the cloud, or data center servers, or patch 1,000 servers, or stop or start a service. That's Ansible. It's been around for decades, right? Well, IBM put together, or Red Hat put together an offering that basically says, here's that old technology, Ansible, combined with AI. And I think one of the things that you'll find is that a hybrid use of anything when it comes to AI and an established technology like Ansible, that's interesting. People can use that. That's not pie in the sky, that's reality. So let's do a definition check about AI. So there have been a lot of early definitions of AI, and I think it's important to go back to those pioneers. The Turing test, Mr. Turing basically said, if a response comes back that is indistinguishable between a human and a person, then you've got AI happening. In 1955, John McCarty said, it's the science of engineering of making intelligent machines. The White House executive order basically uses the NIST definition that came out a few years ago, machine-based system that can make predictions and recommendations. And then in 2017, there was a paper that was put out by Google and by Mr. Viswani, basically saying, called Attention is All You Need. And that started the ChatGPT scene. So it's a form of automation. Okay, two forms of AI, roughly. There's predictive AI and generative AI. And I think it's really important to realize that a lot of people are really just loving the idea of generative AI, because, wow, it writes my paper for me or whatever trivial thing you can think of. We want to get beyond that And we want to talk about non-trivial uses of AI. And so there's predictive AI and there's generative AI. We've been using predictive AI for years, for decades. Spam filters, they use predictive AI, right? They just never hyped it up, all right? So generative AI is important and very interesting, but I just want to point out that it's really important that when it comes to challenges with AI adoption, whether it be predictive or generative, these are the challenges here. Those are the top challenges that we see. And the top of the top challenges is determining the best human and AI interaction. See, I think that's really important to think about. It's kind of what I was talking about when I was talking about dialogue. Okay, so what does it mean to have the best AI and human interaction? And that's really what I want to spend a lot of this particular keynote on. And one of them is I want to, it's not a plug, but I want to talk about, if you can see it here, I'll put it in front of my face, Diet Coke, right? Diet Coke keeps me going. Actually, I'm sure it doesn't, but I still keep using it anyway. And the reason I have to drink a lot of Diet Coke is because I hear a lot of superficial AI, what I would call nonsense. So take a look on the left of your screen. These are phrases that I've heard before by some people who should know better. That the help desk has already been replaced by AI. Well, no, chatbots have been used by the help desk for a long, long, long time, right? For decades, and sometimes productively, sometimes not. Just want to say we're seeing more AI oriented, I suppose, but more help desk jobs than ever before. So that's not a statement based in reality. Is it morphing and changing tech support? Yeah. The cloud and AI will eliminate the need for IT workers by 2028. I actually heard somebody say that. It might eliminate the need for today's workers with today's skills 4 years from now. Sure, but trust me, we're still going to need workers in IT who will be working with AI by 2028. I once heard in Europe, I heard somebody say with all the conviction of the world that cybersecurity analytics will be replaced by AI in 2 years. Those things make me have to drink extra Diet Coke. Software development will be replaced by AI in 2 years. Pen testing will be. These are the types I've heard. That's superficial AI. That's nonsense. All right. What do I have to make to justify my claim? Well, I'm lucky enough to talk to various folks. For example, this lady here, Ms. Angelini, she works for Coca-Cola. In fact, she's on the board. She doesn't think those jobs are going away. Any of those things are going away. Are they going to be morphed? Absolutely. Here's a person from another organization, makes more money than Coca-Cola. This is our guy from State Farm. Excuse me, not State Farm. So yeah, from State Farm. He leads the Security Operations Center and Incident Response for State Farm. Okay, he's a CISO. He doesn't think any of those jobs are going away. Is AI going to change them? Absolutely. If you don't believe those two folks, you can think of ISACA. I'm from CompTIA, but I've worked closely with various organizations, including ISACA. They just put out a security analytics cert, right? So they don't think that a security operations center is going away anytime soon. I've visited security operations centers around the world, from Thailand to places even like Cyprus, to Europe, all throughout the United States. None of them think it's going away anytime soon. In a couple of weeks, I'll be going to what's called the Donut in the UK, GCHQ. The Donut is basically a listening post in the UK. They do lots of top secret stuff there. Like I've gone to the Pentagon a lot lately and things like that. I go to the UK and other governments around the world. In fact, I'll be working with the Japan Ministry of Defense tomorrow and in January. They don't think those things are going away. A friend of mine used to work for Google until a couple of weeks ago, but he led up the Google cybersecurity action team. They don't think it's going away anytime soon. Here's the Signal School. The Signal School is a military type of outfit in Japan. Signaling schools, militaries have signaling branches that have to do with listening and have to do with dealing with encrypted technologies. They're training people in AI, but also they're training people in software development, pen testing, security analytics. They don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. With this person on the right, his name is Andy Flatt, leads the operations for a healthcare company in Nashville, Tennessee. He doesn't think it's going anywhere. You get the pattern. The NCSA, these are leaders in Singapore that fairly recently I spoke with. None of them think that it's going away, right? So let's get to a specific example, shall we, about AI. Now, there's the dock strike example. I think that's top of mind on a lot of people's minds. And Betty and Kevin, thank you for coming up with this, mentioning this example. It's a really good one. What is the dock strike? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's basically on the East Coast. A lot of workers are basically saying, based on cost of living, based on, or they're worried about automation, they're worried about technology. A lot of the dock workers use a lot of very manual processes. And you know what? There are reasons for that sometimes. If technology goes down, those workers can't unload the ships. They literally use paper and pencil, right? And there's a couple of reasons for that. You could say, well, it's very old, very retrograde job security, but there is a justification to say, well, if the docks can be unloaded, if the cranes are working and computers are down for whatever reason, a piece of paper and a pencil can go a long ways, or a pen can go a long ways to keep things going. So there's two sides to the coin, right? But it has this strike that was going on has to do with attitudes towards technology, maybe generational thinking, or the need or the perceived need to not upskill, but the need for upskilling. It brings up supply chain considerations and financial considerations and valid technological considerations. What does happen when the power goes out and you've over relied on something such as AI or on automated technologies that would require redundant power? And when I say redundant power, I mean, power supplies that don't go down. And I don't mean power supplies in your computer. I mean power that generates electricity. So there are a lot of reasons why dock workers have struck. But it also has to do with kind of a fear of technology. And I think one of the reasons why there's a lot of root causes of the AI, superficial AI nonsense that you'll hear, has to do with age-old thinking, right? And some of that age-old thinking is, I don't know, maybe it's as old as humanity, but it's thousands of years old. Maybe as old as this tree. That tree is called a bristlecone pine tree, oldest living thing known to mankind, right? They're in Nevada, I was able to hike to that not too long ago. We tend to think when it comes to AI nonsense, and you hear this with IT nonsense, we forget the old phrase that computer folks use. It's kind of a cliche, but I think it's a good one. Garbage in, garbage out. If we don't put the right stuff into AI, you're going to get the wrong stuff out, right? Wrong in, wrong out. There's also the idea of what it means to forget where the information comes from, both in priming AI and teaching it, but also where it comes out. It's just like, well, AI said, it's like, well, wait a minute. How was that AI trained? Who did it? All that. We forget that because we tend to treat tech still as a mystery box. I'm really lucky. I get to talk to technologists around the world, and even technologists kind of do that. In other words, IT folks is still like, well, what AI said, or it's what the machine said. It's like, doesn't matter. You have to have a human in the loop. So a lot of people, though, they kind of leave the real work to something else. Maybe AI can do the work, or someone else. And the problem is they leave too much of the work to someone else or to something else. And we're going to talk about that balance here in just a second. But I think a lot of people, they mistake slick delivery of an idea for authoritative delivery. Well, sure seems convincing. I mean, isn't it great when Bard or Chat GPT comes back with something, so quickly and it seems so nice? Well, but the facts, you got to figure it out, right? So how do you do that? I think there's also a lack of digital literacy that's going on worldwide. Sure, everybody seems to know how to use their mobile phone, but do they really understand how it works, and can they really think when it comes to using that device? And that's part of digital literacy. But I also think that just because people can consume certain devices, doesn't mean they really know how they work. That's what I mean by digital literacy, the ability to understand the workings of these things. And the lack of digital literacy kind of leads to technical intolerance on the part of executives, on the part of even IT workers, but as a part of the culture of an organization. I think it leads to things like what I call the CAP model, What's the CAP model? The copy and paste model, right? That's a problematic model. We saw that with Wikipedia a couple of decades ago or whatever, right? It's certainly even more of an issue now. I think there's also kind of a lack of business empathy on the part of IT workers. How does the business, the organization work? Doesn't matter if you're in a nonprofit like CompTIA, doesn't matter if you're in a government, doesn't matter if you're in a for-profit or whatever, large, small, whatever sector. You have to have a good empathy for the processes of the business and to map those to technology. And that's one of the biggest issues that we see. So when people start talking nonsense about AI, it kind of makes the problem worse. Avoiding human dialogue. It's really very common for people to kind of do that. I also think there's an understanding of the layers involved in how artificial intelligence is used and works productively. And I'll talk about those layers here in a second. But the key right now is to understand AI can't solve these problems by themselves. Humans solve those problems. If AI is the baby or the toddler or the adolescent, then obviously it needs to be trained, needs to be retrained, corrected, etc. Right? So how much of that is possible right now? See, we're in early days. But the augmented human being, remember I was talking about what it means to be critical, and I talked about some AI nonsense. The augmented human being, dialogue is critical, and that involves negotiation and compromise. And I don't mean being compromised as in cybersecurity. I mean being able to kind of say, okay, I see where you're going, and I'm now going to negotiate with the inevitable. Okay, I'm going to negotiate with this thing so that I can compromise and come up with something even more creative. And this is what human dialogue is all about. So the considerations, of course, are curiosity. How can I add value to this? Once again, iteration. How can I explain something? How can I explain how I came to the conclusion or how AI came to the conclusion? Now, I would argue humans have to still come to the conclusion, but are there transparent steps? Can you explain? And is there transparency along the way? Transparency simply means, okay, I can tell you how I came to this conclusion, but is there a way that you can reach, you can point out and say, well, here are the processes that we use every day for our research, or the processes we use every day for that chatbot. So that if something comes up, if the chatbot says something that makes somebody angry, or the chatbot avoids something or says something silly, can you transparently go and point to the processes and say, here's how we came up with our conclusion to explain it? You can't have explainability without transparency. So there's the goal. Now, when it comes to solving problems with AI, this is where I'm going to point out something. This is a person, an interesting guy, Deepak. He basically said this: it's important to be clear about what we mean by AI. Some forms of AI, such as machine learning, have been around for years, and he calls that practical AI, stuff that's been worked out. And he says, essentially, it's a sophisticated form of automation and everybody should be using it. And then he says, generative AI is different. He's kind of throwing some shade here. He says, it's a great starting point if you want to be 90% correct, okay? In finance, we typically steer towards precision. So he likes the idea of predictive AI. But what will AI replace? And the answer is repetitive skills, anything repetitive. And we've seen this. Right? We've seen this with web scripts, for gosh sakes. When I say web scripts, I mean a simple Python script or even a bash script. We've seen people's, if not jobs, but certain tasks get replaced very quickly. So if you do something that's really repetitive, right? AI is not going to do anything for you there. It's going to do something to you. It's going to replace you. And here's an example. I was in South Korea, and I was there at the airport. And this bot went by, and a person who was a janitor came by right after. And I talked with her really quick, and I said, do you worry about this bot here, this robot here replacing you? She said, no, actually, what it does is it just makes it much easier for me to do my job, because there are things that robot can't do that I can do. Okay. I thought that was interesting. And so basically it allows her to do her job better. I thought that was interesting. Right? Now, is that false sense of security on her part? I don't know. She's been doing this for quite some time with this robot. They haven't replaced her. So she pivoted, right? And she has still, in that position, some things that bots can't do yet, okay? So what can and can't AI do? So what AI can't do, it can't thrive in a toxic tech and management culture. if the culture of your organization is kind of broken in some ways, or a lot of significant ways, throwing AI in there ain't gonna fix it, okay? So it won't thrive. In the same way that a child can't thrive in a bad situation, neither will AI. It can't manage some of the things that make a toxic tech culture. And these are things such as shadow IT, shadow AI, and technical debt. These may be phrases you've never heard of before, but these are phrases I hear a lot. One of them, for example, shadow IT is this. It simply means that some element of your company, it doesn't matter if your company is really small, really big, what happens is that some element of the company creates an IT solution without letting the IT department know. Think about that. So if the IT department doesn't know that, let's say the sales department has created a customer relationship management software, a piece of software like Salesforce or something from the cloud, and IT doesn't know about it, that's shadow IT, because it's technology that's hiding in the shadows. Can't find it, can't see it. Now, I realize that's why pen testers exist, but this is a problem that's a serious problem. Another big problem is something called technical debt. And it's a term that came out of the programming world. And it's a word that means this. If you create a solution, right? Let's say if you're coding something and you reference an old way of doing things, an old library, or a way of creating a loop or something that is kind of a little outdated, that's called technical debt. And usually it's talked about in terms of bad customer experience. Like, well, the app has some technical debt and customers don't like it because it's kind of clunky or whatever. But technical debt is more wide-ranging and more significant than that. Because anytime as you create a solution in the cloud as an IT worker, not just as a programmer, but somebody who is a cloud administrator or somebody who create some sort of solution, if you skip a step along the way, well, there's no time to do a security review, that incurs a debt. And if you don't pay that debt back, what happens? Well, frankly, attackers come along and they make you pay that debt. I would argue that a lot of the ransomware issues you've heard about, or supply chain attacks, and all these different types of attacks that you hear about, I would argue that those are probably the bad people exploiting technical debt that wasn't paid back. So you could argue that ransomware really is a form of repossession. And instead of the instead of the technical debt being paid back by the IT department or something, it's the attacker that kind of in a brutal way takes advantage of that debt. Now, we all know what happens when you play a country record backwards. You know what that is? You get your dog back, your car back, your wife back, right? When it comes to technical debt, it's a really big deal. It's a very real thing. In fact, fairly recently, I heard a general once, the general was in the United States, a general, basically saying there's a lot of technical debt in the technologies of the military that they are trying to get rid of, to pay off. He used the term pay off. And it simply means bad processes. It could mean something as simple as using an old operating system. You could argue that the ATMs of the world, ATMs where you get your cash, a lot of them are, I was lucky enough to see one time how ATMs worked. The ATM I saw, this was about a year ago, that I saw was using Windows NT. Okay, Windows NT. That's a long time ago. That's an example of technical debt. Not too long ago, I was at a session where somebody was getting their arm imaged, right, X-ray. And I was geeking out with the X-ray technician, and I noticed that system was using, I think it was Windows 97, right? So you have this $1 million X-ray machine and that old OS. Why were they using such old OSs? Well, it's not because they're lazy and don't know how to update. It's because the vendors of those tools control what operating system is used. And if you update it yourself, it'll break its ability to run that $1 million X-ray machine, right? So those are examples of technical debt. Shadow AI is simply where AI is simply being used without any sort of policy, any sort of rules, or any sort of guide. So it's an important thing to think about. AI cannot automatically solve problems, and it can't really make decisions to improve processes particularly well yet. We still need human beings for that. What it can do, it can work really well with content. It can augment human decisions. It can help create predictive models very well, and it can automate and modify processes. And when I say it works with content. It has a really good uncanny ability to go through just, reams and reams of paper or paragraph after paragraph, thousands of characters, billions of characters, and summarize. It's really quite good at it, right? So, but if you don't understand the AI layers, I think it's really important to get to get at it. So, one of the things I think it's really important to think about is the AI layers. And by the layers, I'm a technologist at heart, so I love the layers 1 through 7 of the OSIRM. But when it comes to AI, there are more layers. There's the layer 8. It's not an official layer of the OSIRM. It's the individual. Layer 9 is the organization. Layer 10, governance and compliance. Are you following the rules? And then information. So let's talk about some of these layers here and how it's really being used. This lady here, I talked with fairly recently, just a few months ago. And she was honest enough to say, hey, we're still looking into how AI is being used. And she said, who's creating the AI in your organization is the first question she asked. And she said, well, that's something that we need to get our policy around. So that's a very important thing. Otherwise, you do end up with something called shadow AI. In the same way, shadow IT is technology running around in the shadows. Shadow AI is basically where you have this technology being used with really no rules, right? So how can you help create a positive environment? And I think it's understanding these layers. So the first 3 layers are the hardware, and I think if you've ever watched the whole ride of the NVIDIA stocks, going up and down and all that, the graphics processing units, right? The hardware, but there's also the software that powers those things, and then the data. Those are the first 3 layers, and you can check that out. We did a smart brief on this at CompTIA, and we also have something you'll see once you get these slides, a report that we created called Building AI Strategy. And the idea is that what can you do to start building AI strategy? And one of the answers is, in addition to those 3 layers, you've got the AI layer, the data layer, the information technology layer, the policy and the culture layers. Those are so important to understand, because when it comes to malfunctions or issues here and the fears that we tend to have, I think it comes from an organization not spending enough time getting their ducks in a row with each of these layers. So when you have an issue, this is Jen Easterly. She works for CISA in the US. She'll say if there's some sort of problem, it's some sort of problem, let's say in a cybersecurity problem, and it's a software quality problem, in these layers. I would argue it's probably not so much pointing the finger at the software developers, because if you do that, I think you end up, what's the old story? Mom taught me, if you point a finger at somebody, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you, right? I think that it's less of a software problem and more of a layer problem. And you could argue that the security problem or the AI problem is likely more of a leadership problem than anything else, if you really have to point a finger. But I think it has to do with good leadership that doesn't set up a problematic culture. And I'll give a couple of negative examples of cultures. You may have never heard of this. It's called the UK Post Office scandal. Started a long time ago, over 20 years ago. And it was when a company, won't name the company, you can Google this, was asked by the UK Post Office, hey, we have these post offices, I think 12, 13,000 of them around the UK, and we need software that automatically adds up the books, that automatically does the accounting. And so they put that in place. Problem is the software had a problem. The software had a problem where it couldn't add correctly. So if you are a worker in the post office and you run these little post office stores, and you don't know what these post office stores are like, they're basically stores that are run by, you could call mom and pop, run by oftentimes an individual or a couple of individuals. And these are the stores that you can go into and get stamps, or you can get stationery. You can ship things, yes, but it's really a very small business. Well, what was happening is that they couldn't do the accounting right, so they got some software in. Long story short, over a period of 10, 15 years, this software had an accounting problem. So at the end of every month, let's say you run one of these post offices, you end up with a bill. And at first the bill might have been 50 pounds that you owed. It's like, well, I'll pay that off, because the culture said if there's a shortfall at the end of the month, you get to pay it. You can't really ask about it. But after a while, After a while, it wasn't 50 pounds, it was 500 pounds, it was 5,000 pounds. People ended up going to jail for fraud. And the reason why they did, you could blame the software, but it was really the company culture behind the software, because there was no ability to say, well, hold on here, let's do some accounting and take a look at the paper and see if the software is right. But the culture said, well, the software is always right. It can never be wrong. So you can't blame the software company necessarily. It's the culture behind it. Imagine if you drop AI into that kind of culture, what kind of chaos would ensue? Now you had about 700 people thrown in jail, including pregnant women, etc. And now many of those, most of those, have been exonerated most of them after many, many years, after serving jail sentences. So it got that serious. Air Canada, I think most of us have heard about Air Canada, how they used botnets, right? And those botnets were generative AI. They generated their own little customer service solution, which was to make up a miles policy, and they were forced to honor it. And it cost Air Canada a lot of money. This is what I mean by layers of problems, okay? Can AI thrive in a toxic environment? Well, the first question is, can humans survive in that, right? And the answer, if you were to ask the SolarWinds folks, CrowdStrike, Air Canada, etc., they'd say no. And we did a survey, and we've said, how can AI help us? And what we discovered was, let me go back to that. If you look at the first ones to the right of your screen, about 16% said no, AI is going to make things worse. 22% said it will make things worse moderately, and 25% said it'll actually make things a little worse. Now, is that fear of AI talking? Possibly, but I think behind that is people realizing they don't have their processes going. So we're not just talking about people, processes, and technology. If I hear that phrase again, I might throw up. But I suppose it's a true phrase, but people usually use that phrase to shut down thinking rather than start thinking. So it depends on your policy. This is something that Chris Cochran taught me. He's a threat hunter, used to work for the NSA, for Netflix, now works for Huntress Labs. And his whole idea was that if you set the policy correctly, it determines a culture. It anticipates problem and does enable human thinking. Something I also learned from Vint Cerf. I had a brief discussion with him. I was at an election cybersecurity symposium with USC and a few people, and CompTIA was invited. I was able to talk to Vint, and this guy is the person that created the transmission control protocol, TCP/IP. I mean, so you're looking at one of the founders there. And he said the same thing. He said the biggest problem that he did is that he assumed an honest culture when he created TCP. Otherwise, he would have built encryption right in with it at the beginning and authentication. But it was, he just didn't think people would do that. So you have to have the right culture and the right policy. It's another lesson I learned from my former scuba instructor, Christina Cobb, who works as a security analyst at Aviva Health. She feels the same way, that as we use AI, it's a tool like any other. It has to have processes behind it. But it also requires digital fluency. And digital fluency, digital literacy, people will use that term. But there's a difference between being kind of literate at something and being fluent at a language, right? And we need people not just to be literate, but fluent. And I'll bring this up here. One of the examples that was given at this at the UK post office scandal, there were court hearings held, and they were public. You can view them on YouTube. One of the persons was saying, I wasn't aware of the problem. I never got a printout of that problem. And I'm like, what do you mean a printout of that problem? What does that mean? This person, who was at a high executive level, was so not digital fluent, not digital literate, that it was uncomfortable for him to read emails in an email, right? He wanted it printed out. Okay. And you could say, well, that's generational, that's old or whatever. The person wasn't that old. There's a lot less digital fluency going on, is my point. And in a world where automation, AI is one of those automation technologies, is being used, you have to have a tech tolerance. We need to all increase our ability to be fluent and to be more tech tolerant. And so you do that through a company culture, but you also do it through training. And when it comes to things like information, I think it's really important to understand, when I say human in the loop, that's a phrase that is kind of born from an old idea called OODA. Some people call it OODA. Observe, orient, decide, and act. See, OODA. So the idea is feedback loops. Are you engaging in feedback loops and encouraging that? And this is something I heard from Ms. Lobash, right? She talked to me as a data analyst. She lives in Africa. And she was basically saying that the people who work with AI will be more successful than those who don't. But it's very important that they understand where the information comes from, not just the data. In some ways, the last thing we need is more data. What we need is more information. Data is the random stuff. Information is something that has been properly collected and mined and analyzed and visualized with a policy behind it. That's what governance means. Governance simply means, do you have a policy and do you follow it, right? Because you're governed by that policy. So those are the things that are going to help us get our ducks in a row. That are going to help us get past superficial AI, that help us make sure that you don't have a toxic company culture. So the skills needed, what kind of skills do you need to get out of shadow IT, to kind of see, a more bright horizon, as it were, right? Well, to overcome those superficial intelligence issues, I'm lucky enough to be taught by people around the world, and you're looking at some of them. Let's see. At the top there, the folks, one guy that's has his tongue sticking out at you, that's Harold. He's a fantastic guy, works for the U.S. government. You have another lady there, works as a data scientist for, I think, Fujitsu. Hitachi Soft, sorry. And what she does is she basically says you have to avoid the copy and paste model. And you have to combat what Robin Hunt, that's the blonde person there, lady there, calls the AI oracle effect. In other words, well, the oracle has spoken, it must be true, right? How do you treat AI like a mystery box? And that's the phrase that I was taught by this group of women who are in Malaysia, and taught me some really cool things about what does it mean to apply AI appropriately to a specific task. Because if you're not applying AI in a specific way, then you're just kind of talking, or you're doing it in a very superficial way. So going back to that point that I made earlier about interacting with your AI coworker, is AI something that is that Terminator hand that's going to destroy you, or is there a point where you can actually do augmentation of the human, where you have the human in the loop, right? So you have to realize what AI can and can't do. And there's this point, right? This interstice meaning that little space where we need to kind of investigate where it happens. And the first answer is in a dialogue. What do you guys see here? Do you see two people talking, right? Looking at each other, or do you see a cup, right? This idea is basically that as two people communicate with each other, something good can come out of it if they're speaking honestly and intelligently and informed, and if they are engaging in time-honored dialogue. And we're talking Socrates here. If you've ever heard of Socrates before, Socrates before, he was a philosopher, right? Long time ago. But we're kind of living in a world that he created because he taught the importance of dialogue. So what is that dialogue? Well, I would argue that you basically allow AI to do, let's say, 80% of the repetitive work, right? Or 80% of the work, and then humans step in for the non-repetitive. That's where we are going to be right now for some time. Sure, Kurzweil, I think, is it Ray Kurzweil, will say that right around 2040 will come the singularity where AI will overwhelm us. Okay, there's still a lot of time between then, and I think there are ways that we, if we're smart and purposeful about this, we can solve things. And I think you can go back into time to get another thing. Somebody a little bit newer than Socrates is John Henry. He's a folklore figure. He's a real person. He's a person that, if you remember the story of John Henry, he got in a competition with a steam drill, right? And remember the story, what happened? He won, but lost, right? He beat the steam drill because the steam drill kept breaking down, and he was able to bore that hole, create that tunnel before the steam drill. But the problem is he died immediately thereafter, right? Because he exhausted himself. What can we learn from John Henry? Well, let the machine do the work. Did you know that to this day, when you do drills into the North Sea, right? When they drill for oil in the North Sea, did you know that that's an automated process? But the process of making sure the drills don't get bound up in all of the dirt and the rocks and things, that's a human process. In other words, you let the automation do all that, but then a human goes in and makes sure that the drills get cleaned out and don't get bound up. See, that's kind of what I'm getting at with the 80-20 rule. Humans are still necessary. It's just finding your place for that. That's a lesson I learned from Rachel Singleton. She works in the UK. She's in the UK Royal Navy over the Royal Navy's AI program. And she taught me the importance of what it means to do that. Well, here's an example. Here's a dialogue I want to show you. This is a relatively old dialogue, I think about 6 months ago. I'm sure AI has gotten a bit smarter since then, but I did a bit of ego surfing, right? I typed my name in. I said, who's James Stanger? And it says, you know, some fairly accurate stuff there, right? But then it said that I've written several books, including CompTIA Cloud Essentials and the CompTIA Security Plus Study Guide and all that. I never wrote those books. Okay, I've written a lot of books, trust me, but not those two. And it says that I have Security Plus, A Plus, which I do, and ITIL Foundation, ITIL, great certification. I don't have ITIL Foundation. Okay. So I'm like, well, so I started a little dialogue. And this is very, you know, you could call this primitive prompt engineering, but it isn't. I'm just saying, are you sure this is James Stanger you're talking about? Which one are we talking about here? And it says, hey, you know, he's published a few things. He's the chief technology evangelist at CompTIA. Okay, that's me. And then I said, well, does he have a PhD? And I said, well, no, James doesn't. According to his LinkedIn profile, he has a BA in international studies from the University of Washington and an MBA from Capella. Well, I do have a PhD. It's a useless PhD in English, but I don't have a BA from University of Washington. So clearly they've got a couple of James Stangers kind of mixed up, or I'll use a fancy word, concatenated. You know, they combined them, right? I'm not a CEH. You know, I mean, I don't have those things. And I said, well, what are James Stanger's qualifications? And then it gave me a bunch of certs that I don't have. I don't have CRISC. I don't have Server Plus, right? And I don't have an MBA, right? My point behind this is, who's going to say what the facts are, right? Who's going to engage in the right prompt engineering to come to the truth, to come to the dialogue, right? I think that's really important because one of the founders of AI back in 1966 said a certain danger lurks in trusting any power structure, from governments to large companies, to our insistently human tendency to believe anything a computer tells us. And I think that's just really important. What kind of loops can we put in place so that if information is told to us in an authoritative way, in such a way that we believe, that actually we can get correct information? And I think this comes back to taking the mystery out of AI. This is a mysterious place you're looking at, probably in more ways than one. You have no idea what you're looking at, but that is a waterfall. It's in England. It's called Kinder Downfall. And I think you could probably tell from that picture, but have you noticed which way the water is going, right? In a waterfall, it's supposed to fall, isn't it, right? Hence the name. Well, in this case, notice the water is going up. And the reason it is because the wind blows really hard through a canyon, right from the ocean, inland many miles, until it blows up this canyon and makes the waterfall flow backwards. And I stood there watching this waterfall 50 feet over my head or more doing its thing. The reason I bring this up is that for centuries, before the Enlightenment, I guess, this was seen a very magical place. There were all sorts of, sprites and things that are supposed to live in this area, right? And that's, I'm telling you the story because I think we treat AI as kind of this mythical thing sometimes. And it comes back to Arthur C. Clarke. If you've ever heard of 2001: A Space Odyssey, he once wrote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I love that. In other words, if it's really advanced, like, ooh, it must be magic. I still think we're in that kind of magic worldview when it comes to AI. So what does it mean to get out of it? Well, here are some people I learned. Let's see, people on the right there. If you look at them, that's a leader, one of the leaders of AWS. I was talking with him. And also the other person named Kash. Kash lives here in Seattle. And I was asking them, when it comes to AI, what are some of the ways that you can take the magic out of AI? And place that magic in the human beings where it belongs. So I don't want to take the magic out of anything in a positive way. I mean, magic can be cool, but also that kind of mystery. I don't think that's useful. Okay. So Kash manages 5 teams of AI engineers worldwide, and they do data modeling to assist human decisions. A lot of government clients, a lot of corporate clients, and they work with large language models. And I said, well, what are some of the skills that are really important? And he said, both of these folks, the AWS worker down in Indonesia and also Kash here, in Seattle, in addition to the soft skills that I talked with you about, empathy and curiosity, make sure you know how cloud architectures work. Now, see, that goes back to the idea of the layers. Remember, I showed you the different layers, the hardware, the software, the information. And then I also talked about AI having additional layers, like the cultural layer and also the IT layer. So we're talking about the IT layer here. Do you understand how the cloud works? And the architectures involved there involve things such as good networking. So, because if you're going to place those systems in the cloud, you better have a good network so you can get to it, right? But you also need additional architectures. One thing that our 2025 report at CompTIA, our cybersecurity report, talks about the need for multiple architectures, business architecture, technical architecture, data architecture, and security architecture, all those things. So cloud architecture is one of the first things. Full stack development, he says, is a really important thing. So developing, of course, is important. You don't necessarily have to be a full stack developer. You could be a front end developer, like my kid, James. He's a front end developer who actually works for AWS. So those are the things to think about, some skills. Project management came up as a major skill. The ability to do data analytics. Folks at AWS don't move unless there's some sort of data that tells them to make that move, right? And they're very good at it. And then cybersecurity. In one case, I know some folks at AWS, one of the first things they did with their developers and their cloud people, they put them right through security training. And at first they're like, hey, I'm a programmer. I don't need this security stuff. Trust me, they need it. So those are some of the important skills to think about here. When it comes to X factor skills, and by X factor, I mean kind of unspoken skills to think about. I'm talking about the need for curiosity, to negotiate with the inevitable. There's always going to be change. How can you position yourself for that change? That's what I mean by negotiating with the inevitable. Process improvement. Obviously, AI is going to change things, and it's going to change processes before it changes anything else. Where are you in your understanding of the organizational processes that you have at your company? Engaging in a dialogue. Do you just copy and paste stuff, or do you really engage in a smart command line prompt dialogue with your AI? Do you know what it means to kind of keep trying persistently to iterate and improve things? When it comes to understanding cybersecurity and foundational skills, that's very important. But the idea of lateral thinking, and lateral thinking means kind of thinking a little outside of the box, kind of coming up with your own, with some insights that maybe everybody who's very linear, you're thinking, well, there's something over here that we all need to be thinking about. That's lateral thought. AI right now is not really good at that. Advanced IT skills are great, data skills, all those things are very important. Now, if you want to get some information on this, about what AI means in various sectors, about how organizations are kind of resetting expectations, about how they're overcoming obstacles to AI success, check out the Building AI Strategy Report. It's free, and it's information, though, that has been gathered by talking with literally hundreds of IT leaders, corporate leaders around the world. So thank you for your time. I've kind of talked us up to the last few minutes. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead and put it into the chat window. I'd be happy to answer any and all questions. And I want to thank you very much, Betty and Kevin, and thank you very much, Seti, for the opportunity to keynote, to talk with you, not just about AI, but what it means to be a human, really, working in the IT space. Doesn't matter if you're a programmer, it doesn't matter if you're an infrastructure worker, like a cloud worker, or a cybersecurity worker, or a developer, or somebody who's a data analyst. All of those pillars of IT, all those areas of IT, we're all going to be affected by it, and it's just a question of positioning yourself for success. So thank you very much for your time. Betty, I'll turn the time back over to you if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you, James. And if you would go to the last slide, please.
You bet.
Okay, and we'll pause it here. I have gotten a few private questions, which is perfectly okay. But
Cool.
before we get to those, as you were talking, I was just thinking about, in my role and responsibility working in continuing ed and supporting continuing educators, how I personally have used it, and I want to give my experience.
Cool.
I mean, whoa, what a great presentation. I learned a lot, and I've only started dabbling in personally using AI recently, but I'll tell you what I use it for, and it might help some of our listeners. Um, Such things as assistance with job descriptions, just getting you started, interview questions for specific roles and responsibilities, as well as transition plans for individuals retiring.
Yes.
It,
Yeah,
it
very
did
good.
it did not work. I mean, it did not create it for me. It did not do my homework, but it got me started with things that I may not have thought about. But I'm like, yeah, that applies. So did AI do all the work for me? Heavens no.
No.
It was a starting place. And then you have to apply the human touch that you talked about to achieve what you need. AI saved me many hours of work in order to take the time to get a customized final product. So, do I think AI is can it be used for good? Can it be used for bad? Absolutely.
Oh,
Our responsibility in education is to teach people how to use it for good, and why should we? Because I knew what my task was, but instead of having to start from scratch, it gave me a thought process where I was on a different level where I could create a better final product. So I realize, as Dr. Stanger gave us many more examples that are a whole lot more complex than that. But
a great example, actually. Yeah.
that was my experience in using AI. And I assure you, I promise you, if I can do it, you can do it. So I challenge our audience. I do have some questions. If you things that I just said and what James said, if you want to put any comments for the whole group to see, and how you think you can use it, because I literally learned how to do what I did in 10 minutes or less, and looked at it with a positive attitude. But we got a few questions about, um, and I like this question. I tried to group them in an order. Where do you see AI being used the most, and how will CompTIA's training content
Mm.
align with these areas in future offerings?
Great question. I'll answer the CompTIA alignment question. What we're finding is that I mentioned earlier, kind of alluded to it, the four pillars of IT, right? So one is data, one is cybersecurity, one is infrastructure, in other words, networking and the cloud, things like that. And then the last one, or not well, the last one, but the other one is development security. Is AI a fifth pillar, right? Is it a fifth thing? Or is AI going to inform those four pillars? And I can't tell the future very well. I don't think many of us can. But I do think that what we're seeing is AI is working its way into changing processes, it's changing job roles. And so what we're doing, we're already seeing its impact as we take a look at the new A plus, as we take a look at what we saw with cloud coming out. Cloud Plus coming out recently. We're seeing it creeping its way into job roles. The other thing, what was the first part of that question, Betty? So
Well,
it's working its way into job roles is the short answer.
and I think that goes sort of into, with our audience, myself included, we need to know, as the providers of education and trying to be on the leading edge to help our service communities and people who are reskilling, upskilling, just starting out. What advice would you give us in offering specific CompTIA courses, certificate and or credential? And I know on CompTIA's website you have an excellent roadmap that helps
Yeah.
all of us continuing educators. Will that be being updated anytime soon, do you think? Because that's a good guide for us to be able to guide our students.
You know, it is. In fact, we just had a session where we did an update of the CompTIA roadmap. In fact, and if you guys don't know about what the roadmap is here, I'll send you this link here. Let me do that there. And it's something that we do update quite often. So there's a Facebook link, not the best link. I'm not a real fan of Facebook, but I will send you this link, these couple of links that you can go and check out that. So yes, we do in fact update it. When I say this link, I'm put it into the chat window. So if you don't have your chat window up, you won't see it. But if you do, you will see it.
And I see we do have a public question here from Megan. Does CompTIA do you utilize AI within CompTIA? How do you use it?
That's a really good question. because there was a real scramble there to say, hey, we've got to do things from a policy perspective. So we started a policy, and then we use ChatGPT, but we use a private, I'll say a private version of it. We purchased a version of it so that when CompTIA employees use it, it's not the public one, because all that goes into the public domain. And if there's somebody asks an important business question that has some sensitive information in it, that goes public, doesn't it? So we use a private version of ChatGPT. Another thing that we do is that, for example, for our business communications, marketing communications, things like that, we also have an AI engine based on ChatGPT that will go in and it takes a look at our corporate content policy about how to express yourself, not too formally, not too informally. It does more than just look for spelling problems or grammar problems. It actually looks for improper tone, words that can't be used, and it scrubs through that. And when I say it scrubs through that, it kind of reads out what you've written and it gives suggestions. So there's a couple of different ways that we use it. We're also leading the way at looking about what AI can do to not generate items. You can't have AI generate items for lots of reasons. One, if AI generates, when I say items, courseware or images or exam items, there's many reasons why you wouldn't do that. But one of the reasons is that if something is created by a machine, it can't be copyrighted, at least not right now, right? So, and we have to make sure we secure copyright anything, whether it be our content or our courseware. Also, AI right now is just not quite accurate enough in a lot of cases. It needs to be improved. But what we are doing is using AI to help suggest the basis for items, or the basis, or understand, to give the subject matter experts more context so that they can create better items. See, that way it helps build a foundation, and then the human being can then jump off and create proper items and things like that. So in a workshop, AI can be used to help set up scenarios and help set up the mindset of the subject matter expert, and then they create the item. So that's one. There are a lot of different, those are a couple of different ways that AI is being used at CompTIA.
Okay. We are top of the hour, so I totally understand if
Sorry.
anybody has to leave. We do have one more question, and if we take that one, we will have answered everybody's question and fulfilled our promise. But before I do, in case anyone leaves, I really do once again want to thank you all for attending, and thank you to all our SETI 2024 sponsors. The partnership of helping us put this conference on virtually for you is a huge success. So with that, I'm going to go real quick to the last question. Sure. Can you briefly tell us, have you used AI in helping you and your colleagues involved in any grant writing programs, processes? Because I know a lot of people in our audience work on grants because nobody has any money and we have to go after the money.
The way I've used it in any sort of grant writing process is to help get through research. And when I say help get through research, if you can, I've written grants before and participated in grants before over the years. And the best way that you can get a grant is to be, hyper informed about the topic, but also to be hyper informed about the steps that grants that you need to take to write a good grant. Does AI write anything that ends up in a grant? Not in my experience, ever, right? It just doesn't work that way. But using Copilot, for example, using the one that is available for, when I say the one, the AI that's available for Adobe, it allows me to sift through, 100 pages, and it does a pretty good job, quite good job, of summarizing that content and the most pithy and most important elements. That saves me an enormous amount of time. So that means the grant is a better written document because I'm able to save time in research. Here's my analogy. When it comes to doing grants, you have to do your research. When it comes to doing research, it can be very tedious. I enjoy research a lot, but anything that can speed things up is good. My analogy is painting a house. I don't know if you've ever painted a house, Betty. Even if you haven't painted a house, I don't know if you knew this, but the vast majority of the work is the preparation for the house, right? The preparation. blocking off all of the bits that don't want paint, the windows, for example, and making sure that certain things are blocked off, the scrubbing and all that. That, if you're going to paint a house over a week and you have a sprayer, right, you'll spend 4 hours spraying the house, right? Maybe 6 hours, not even that much probably, right? But you'll spend most of the week preparing the house. It's the same way with research. To do that preparation work, that's the 80%, maybe 90% of the work. And so with AI, doing that research and speeding that up, that's where it is. But the actual writing process, that's still something that probably still takes a human being, from my experience. So there's that.
And that makes total sense. AI can be your friend, but not your savior.
Yeah,
Savior.
that's right,
Yeah.
savior. And I have seen you. It's a great point. But I've also seen there are times when AI is going to take jobs. It just will, right? And there are a lot of cynical reasons why. There can be very honest reasons or very real reasons, like, well, look, it was a repetitive job. We can get rid of that repetition, right, and get rid of you. That's going to be a reality, okay? But the other cynical uses of AI will be, I've seen a very large company a year ago say, oh, with the advent of AI, we were able to eliminate 15,000 jobs or whatever. I'm sorry, I just think that is absolutely ridiculous. Most companies are still early days. They're certainly not at a level where they can intelligently let go thousands of people because, AI. That's ridiculous.
Okay.
Some people, sure, of course, but not that. So they're going to be real and cynical uses of AI for sure.
Okay. Well, again, a big shout out to you, Dr. James Sanger. It has been my pleasure. I mean, we work with CompTIA. I'm sure that most everybody on this call works with CompTIA. We're a big supporter. It helps our students because there's so many foundational places people can get started and career paths to build on, and that helps us to be able to counsel our students. So with that, I want to say thank you, and please join us at 1 o'clock for our next session. And it's going to be a panel discussion, and you're going to get lots of information at 1 o'clock. So I look forward to seeing who shows up that was here this morning. So with that, have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.